Hello and welcome to another episode in the sessions of Uni Guide on ZNotes. We're really excited to have Asen, founder of Intellete, joining us today to talk about applying to universities in Europe. Now, I know that many of us are thinking about destinations in Europe, but it's really hard to know the different nuances in different countries, the different programs you could apply for, and different scholarship opportunities that are also available in many of these institutions. So, really excited to have Asen who's also an alumnus of IE Business School and another school in Spain as well. So he really understands and has actually lived that student life there in Spain as well. So, Austin, wonderful to have you on board. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Sabir. It's a pleasure to be here. Our first time kind of working with ZNotes, and I'm really excited to talk about European education. I'm a very passionate advocate for studying in Europe myself, having done it in Spain. So I'm hoping I can share some insights about studying there and hopefully inspire some of you to also consider Europe as a destination.
Absolutely. So the format of the session is that Austin will go through a couple of really deep insights and slides to talk through what those different destinations are. And we have a dedicated Q&A session. So make sure that as you have questions and queries to send them in the chat so we can keep a track of them. And we'll definitely have some time to ask Austin our questions at the end of it. So over to you, Austin. I'll bring our slides up and let's get started.
Thank you, Zubair. And once again, I want to thank you and the ZNotes team for setting this up. It's a real privilege to be here today and talk to a lot of students. There are quite a lot of complications at times when applying to Europe. So, during the presentation, I'll primarily focus a bit on what the requirements are like when you're coming from international curriculums like the IB, like A-levels, or the American system. But if you have a question at the end about a specific national system, please feel free to ask as well. And then I'll be able to answer kind of more personalized questions and also perhaps give more tailored information and mention specific universities as well. So to start off, we're going to touch on kind of, why you should perhaps consider studying in Europe, a bit about my journey of doing so, some characteristics of different European higher education destinations, what the timeline should look like when you're applying, what some requirements are like, and then kind of also how Intellete can support you in your journey if you're looking to study in Europe. To start off a bit about myself, I'm originally from Pakistan, from Kashmir, but I grew up primarily in Saudi Arabia, having lived in a small city called Jubail and also Dammam, where I graduated from high school before moving on to Spain, studying at IE University in Madrid, Spain. And then after that, I soon started Intellete, helping other students kind of go through a similar journey of studying abroad in Europe. One of the main reasons behind starting Intellete was looking back at the time when I was in high school and figuring out where do I want to go for university, and there being pretty much no support available when it came to European universities. We had a lot of university fairs, we had a couple of counselors, but it was always the UK, US, Canada. So the goal was to make it easier for other students that might want to look at Europe as well. So just to start off, I want to touch primarily starting off within Southern Europe. So we're going to be focused on Italy and Spain primarily as destinations. These are two countries where the lifestyle is incredible. You've got great weather, you've got great people, you've got some really low-cost tuition universities as well as universities that have a wide range of programs in English. And one question that we frequently get are there programs in English? Do I have to learn the local language? The universities that we touch on today, or the countries that we touch on today, we're going to be talking about programs in English only, and there's not going to be any need of knowing the local language, either to get your acceptance or to even get a visa of any sorts as well.
Amazing. Good to hear that.
Yeah, so Italy is very popular for three main things. One is for medicine, one is for fashion and design, and the third I would say is for business. For medicine, it is one of the only countries in Europe that has about 25 medicine programs that are offered in English. This is quite rare considering in other countries like Spain, there's no medicine program that's offered in English. Fashion and design, just being one of the fashion hubs of the world, you have a lot of nice design schools. And for business, they also have what is one of the best business schools in Europe, Bocconi University.
Absolutely.
So starting off with kind of design, these are four very popular design schools. In Italy, majority of them primarily look at your portfolio when they're looking to accept you. You primarily need a high school qualification. Now, when we talk about high school qualification, this is where it can get quite tricky in Europe. In Europe, for example, let's say you look at Italy. In order to enter an Italian university, you need what is equivalent to an Italian high school education. And that could be quite different depending on where you're coming from. So let's say you're applying and you have an A-levels background. The minimum requirement then is that you must have taken 3 A-levels. They do not accept BTech, they do not accept AS levels. There's no sort of you can enter for a foundation year after your AS. You need A-levels to be able to study in an Italian university. If you're coming from, let's say, a national system, the main requirement is that your national system must have some sort of exam at the end of the year to be able to give you a high school diploma. So, for example, Pakistan has the FSC or the board exams, which you have to clear to be able to get their high school diploma. That allows you to be eligible to study in Italy. But let's take the US, for example. The US doesn't have any sort of national exam at the end of the year, which you need to do to get the high
Yeah,
school diploma. So, for example, if you're coming from the American system, you must have at least 3 A levels. Otherwise, you cannot directly enter an Italian university. You have to do some sort of foundation in a year, or you have to study elsewhere for a year before moving on and studying in Italy. So that's
amazing.
something you have to keep in mind. Yeah,
Gotcha. Austin, we're also, and thanks for our listeners who are sending
yeah,
in questions as well. So we're definitely going to have a dedicated Q&A at the end of it as well. But just to
perfect.
quickly respond to Luke,
Yeah,
we will go into some destinations that focus more on STEM, and they definitely, many of the institutions that Austin's mentioning are accepting Cambridge A levels, which many of you may be using and revising from ZNotes one as well. So we'll keep going, and there are a bunch of countries that Austin will walk through with us today.
yeah. Yeah. Luke, don't worry about if you're doing A levels, you're going to be good for pretty much every European country that there's out there.
Amazing.
And yeah, so other requirements are going to be language proficiency, just they need to be able to know that you speak English. And then sometimes universities that are more design or business focused will also ask for a personal statement, kind of similar to one that you would write for the UK. For business and economics, as I mentioned before, these are some universities that are quite popular, Bocconi being at the top. Bocconi is seen as kind of a top school for those that are looking to go into finance after they graduate or looking into investment banking. It is a private university, so it is more expensive compared to other public universities. But still, if you compare it to the UK, for example, Bocconi is about 16,000 euros per year. So that comes out to about, I think, 13,500 pounds. So still relatively more affordable than the UK's lowest cost university for international students. It is a very difficult university to get accepted to. If you're looking at coming from the IB system, they're looking for at least a 38 and above. And also they do have another requirement, which is to pass either their entrance exam or pass the SAT or the ACT. For the SAT, they look at about a 1400 plus. So it's not an easy university to get accepted to. So if you are looking at a top business school in Europe, Bocconi could be a great choice. And then coming into medicine. Medicine is one program that Italy is very popular for. There's 17 public universities that offer medicine in English. There's 8 private universities that offer medicine in English. The public universities are also quite affordable. They're about 3,000 to 4,000 euros per year for tuition.
Wow.
And private universities, though they are more expensive, they're still relatively affordable compared to, again, the UK. I'm going to keep drawing that comparison to the UK, but you can also make that comparison for Canada and the US as well. So about 15,000 to 20,000 euros per year if you're going to study medicine at a private university in Italy. The one thing to keep in mind with Italy and what is tricky if you're looking into medicine is that as a non-European, they only allow you to apply to one public university. So, for example, there's 17 options, but you're going to have to choose one that you want to apply for. And if you don't meet their entry requirements for that year, there's no backup options. Then you would have to look at the private options. For the private options, you can apply to as many as you like, but for public, you're only limited to one, unfortunately. If you're European, you can apply to as many as you like. Now, talking about the main requirement to study medicine in Italy, that is passing something called the IMAT. The IMAT stands for the International Medical Admissions Test, and this is the competitive test that you must pass if you want to study medicine in Italy. While you do need 3 A levels to be able to be eligible to study in Italy, your A level grades really don't matter too much. It's all going to be about if you're able to pass the IMAT or not. Now, the IMAT is a very difficult exam. So it happens every year in September. There's 60 questions. It's out of 90 points. It's out of 90 points, and last year the average score around the world was 30. So the average person around the world last year scored about 30 and wasn't able to get admission into the university that has the lowest requirement for IMAT, which is the University of Bari, which requires a 31.2 out of 90 to get accepted. If you're looking at the very high end, the University of Milan Statale requires a 60.2 in order to be able to get accepted. So that's just to show you how competitive it is. If you're going to apply for Italy and you want to go for medicine, my main recommendation is you start doing the IMAT early on, and then you see how you're scoring. Maybe you're consistently scoring a 40. So maybe you can say, okay, I know I'm scoring a 40 each time I do this exam. Maybe I can apply for University of Bari, and I have a good chance of being accepted. Rather than applying for a university that has a 45 entry mark or a 40 entry mark. So those are just some tips I have. If you look at the kind of the exam itself, there's biology with taking up about 23 of the 60 questions. There's chemistry, taking 15 questions, physics and math, 13 questions, reading skills and general knowledge. A lot of the times this will be also relevant to Italian history, so you should just look up a bit of Italian history beforehand, and then there will be kind of a basic IQ test that has about 5 questions.
Okay.
As long as you pass this test, you have a good shot at being admitted. If you don't pass this test, it's a bit tricky because these tests happen in September, and these happen in September for students that are going to start the university in October. So the turnaround time is very short. So let's say you take the IMAT in September, you don't score enough. There's no other university that can accept you at that point of the year because everywhere else classes have already started. So you maybe want to have a backup of, okay, if I don't get into Italy in September, maybe I can go to Bulgaria because Bulgaria has a couple of universities that start medicine in February, and that way you have a backup option to Italy. Otherwise, you might want to look at other countries or be very confident that you're going to pass the IMAT before settling on Italy as a destination.
Very interesting. And definitely something we should probably at ZNotes look at, supporting IMAT preparation as well.
For sure, for sure. There's going to be some other entrance exam preps that I think ZNotes can help with as well. So Italian universities, going away from medicine, also generally have 2 requirements. One is that you have 3 A-levels, or you have a high school diploma that's equivalent to the Italian high school diploma, and then there's going to be some sort of entrance exam. So if you take a look at example at some other popular universities, such as Politecnico di Milano, that has a civil engineering program in English and an architecture program in English. Again, these are 2 courses which sometimes can be difficult to find in English in Europe, but Politecnico di Milano has them. And the main requirement for admission is you have to either pass an exam called the TOLC, which is kind of like an Italian university entrance exam, or something called an ARST exam for their architecture program. So as long as you pass one of these exams, you can be accepted into the university. It's kind of, there's no kind of minimum or maximum score that you can get. It's kind of every year they're going to look at the number of students that have done the test, see which ones are the highest 20, and maybe accept those 20 students. So you're going to be competing against other students every year. Otherwise, sometimes what they'll say is, if you've done the SAT and you have above 1150, then we'll accept you directly. So my recommendation is always to go for the SAT option first, just because you can prepare for it so much in advance. You can do it multiple times, whereas you can only do this entrance exam sometimes once or twice. So the SAT is a good option. And yeah, another popular university is Sapienza, which has about 37 bachelor's programs in English. So Politecnico and Sapienza, very affordable. Tuition fees are about 3,000 to 4,000, and they have a good range of programs in English that are hard to find in other countries as well.
Amazing.
Yeah. Now, moving on to Spain and France. Spain is, near dear to my heart, one of my favorite countries, and one that I fell in love with when I first visited in 2016. And that's what made me want to go back in 2019 to start off my bachelor's. The one thing I do say about Spain and Italy is that these are not countries in Europe that have a very strong economy. So if you are going to study there, one thing to just kind of have in the back of your mind is once you graduate, maybe you have to look elsewhere to either do your master's, look for a job, or to just settle in. I'm not saying it's impossible, but these are not the strongest economies. So either you have to really stand out during your 4 years of university, or you have to be open to the idea of moving back home or moving to another country after you graduate. It's just kind of a thing in Europe. If you've got the sun and you've got a very nice lifestyle, you probably don't have a strong economy. If it's rainy, a bit dull, and dark, then you probably have a very strong economy. And we'll touch on that later as well.
I think that's a little bit of a poke at the UK, Austin. But
yeah, again, a bit of a poke at the UK. But yeah, that's just the reality, unfortunately. Now, when you look at Europe, you have 2 main types of universities. You've got public universities and you've got private universities. So I had the chance to experience both. I was at a public university initially called Universidad Carlos III de Madrid, before moving on to a private university called IE Business School. So I'll touch a bit on the differences between the two. So in public universities, you're going to have a lot of courses offered, just because these are the universities that the government heavily funds, and they've just been around for so long that they have a lot of course offerings at this stage. Private universities, generally, they're going to have a lot less courses that they offer, and generally the courses are going to be more business-oriented, economics-oriented. You might have some kind of tech courses as well, but usually it's going to be business-related. And then another thing about public universities, which is something that I didn't enjoy during my time, was they were very exam-oriented. So, for example, at UC3M, our kind of academic year was primarily divided into two things when it came to grading. One was the midterm, 40%, and the other was the final exam, 60%. You didn't have to show up to class. As long as you showed up to the midterm and the final exam and you passed those, you were good. which for some students works great. For me, coming from kind of an American high school system where it was a lot more collaboration, projects, assignments, it was something that it was hard to get used to.
Mhm.
Another thing, whereas in private universities, it's usually a lot more diverse. You have assignments. It's kind of like a high school system all over again. Another thing about public universities, the cohorts are massive. So in my class, we used to have lectures where you would have up to 120 students. But then moving on to the private universities, there were classes where it would be 20 students, 30 students, 40 students. Again, depending on how you learn best, this can make a difference. For me, I like those small classes. I felt like I could pay more attention. And I would get distracted less often. Sometimes you also have that factor of someone's going to hold me accountable if we're in a class of 20 and I'm using my laptop the whole time. But in a public or large cohort, sometimes that can go unnoticed. Again, that's not for all public universities. Some public universities still have small class sizes, but it's just something that you should look into before you apply. Another thing is public universities are a lot more affordable. So UC3M for me as a non-European was 6,500 euros a year. And for European students, it's only 1,500 euros a year. Whereas when I went to IE, it was about 25,000 euros a year. So a big, big difference in tuition fees.
Yeah.
Public universities, another thing is that attendance is non-mandatory, so you don't have to show up to class if you don't want to. But in private universities, because the class sizes are only 20, 30 students, they kind of need you to be there for everyone to have a good learning environment. Because if you have 10 people that are not showing up, there's not going to be a lot of learning that they can have happen
Right.
with just 10 students. Another thing I will say is public universities tend to rank higher. But again, I would do like to say that you shouldn't look at rankings. Ranking shouldn't be the only determining factor when you're looking to apply to universities in
Right.
Europe. For example, public universities are just going to rank higher because they have a lot more courses. They can do a lot more research, but perhaps the learning environment isn't going to be what you're looking for. So a private university can be a good option for you where you might be looking for those small personalized class settings. We know when I went to UC3M, it was 150th ranked in the world or something like that, and I thought, wow, fantastic. I have people that I know going to IE, which is ranked 450th in the world. They're making a poor decision. I'm saving a lot of money, but then 2 years later, it just wasn't for me. So I ended up going to IE, paying a lot more, but also having a much more enjoyable experience. And that was kind of the reality hit of, okay, maybe initially I shouldn't have looked into rankings so much as well.
Yeah.
Another thing that I want to say is at both private or public universities, you have the opportunity to do it's something called an Erasmus program. So the Erasmus program basically allows you to study in another European university or outside of Europe, even for one semester or for a whole year. So the great thing about this program is, let's say you're studying at UC3M. We used to have partnerships with universities such as UCL in the UK, Warwick. So we had a lot of students going there, and also a lot of students coming from Warwick and UCL to UC3M. And one of the best things for me was the fact that even if I had to go to Warwick or UCL, I still had to only pay the fees that I was paying at UC3M. And that was, a nice way of getting that UK experience, but also having primarily spent my educational years in Europe. Another great thing about this program, and this is only if you're at a public university, is that the government pays you to do this program. So you're going to be paying 6,500 euros in tuition for UC3M, but they'll pay you, depending on where you go, if you go to the UK, they pay you about 600 euros a month to take part in this program. So again, 600 euros a month isn't going to cover everything, in the UK, but it does help out as an international student. At private universities, you're not able to get the stipend, but you are still able to go on these Erasmus programs. The stipend depends on what country you go to. So if you go to Turkey, it's only about 400 euros a month. If you go to Scandinavia, I think it goes to about 700 euros a month. So yeah, those are just some things to keep in mind if you're interested in studying in Europe.
Amazing. Super helpful. Thanks.
And now looking at some popular universities, these are some of the popular business schools. They've got IE, ESADE, Europea. You've also got Navarra, EU Business School, and UCAM in Spain. And then France is primarily only known for business schools because they don't offer many STEM courses or social sciences in English. It's usually a place that you go for business. They're very well known for their business schools. You've got top schools like ESCP. ESCP has a very cool model where you study in 3 different countries in 3 different years. So you do a year in Paris, you do a year in London, you do a year in Madrid, or you could also do a year in Turin or Warsaw. So if you're looking for something a bit out of the box, a bit more exciting, ESCP could be a good choice. And France is generally quite relaxed with requirements as well. They pretty much accept any sort of diploma, any sort of high school education, and it's not the same barrier that you might face in Italy when applying with, for example, the American high school diploma. The application procedure. So this will depend on if you're applying to a public university or a private university. In France, it's almost impossible to apply to a public university as an international student because there's no courses in English; they're all in French. But if you're applying to a private university, you can pretty much apply any time of the year because they'll generally have rolling admissions. What you'll need are your transcripts, your predicted scores, your personal statement, or sometimes they call it a letter of motivation. A CV is sometimes needed. You'll need a couple of recommendation letters, and a lot of private universities will also have a personal interview at the last stage before they're able to accept you. Some universities might have an entrance exam. For example, IE has an entrance exam where it's kind of like the SAT, but an easier version. And they also have something called a Kira assessment, where it's just kind of like a recorded interview to see how you're able to think on the spot and answer some questions. One thing to note about Southern Europe is that there's not kind of like a centralized portal like the Common App where you can apply from. There are portals or websites where you can get information about the universities, but generally you'll have to apply to each university from their own website. So that's just something to keep in mind as well. Spain, private universities, again, similar documentation requirements. And again, you can apply pretty much any time of the year because generally most of them will have rolling admissions. If you're looking to apply to a public university, UC3M is kind of your only option. And that's because they have something called an early admissions process for international students where you can apply kind of like how you would apply to any other private university, transcripts, predicteds, letter of motivation, and they can accept you. Otherwise, you have to go through a very complicated procedure of taking Spanish national entrance exams, which are done in Spanish. So it's almost impossible for international students. And this is a great university because they have 18 programs in English. They have aerospace engineering. So Luke, as you were asking for STEM programs, they've got aerospace, biomedical, applied mathematics and computing, mechanical engineering, neuroscience, engineering physics. So a lot of different courses in English, and again, very affordable at about 7,000 to 6,500 euros per year. Now looking into some other programs that Spain is quite popular for, dentistry. Dentistry is one program that's taught in about 5 universities in Spain in English. So it's a great option if you're looking into dentistry. The degrees are recognized everywhere in Europe, also in the UK. If you want to practice in the UK later on, you don't need to take the PLABs. So it's a great way to study dentistry. A lot of students from the UK actually who are not able to get any seats in the UK end up coming to Spain for dentistry just because it's an easier kind of fitting in. It's close by. The lifestyle is great. It's sunny all the time. And the degrees are also recognized everywhere. It's a 5-year program. And it's one of those degrees that I would say, even if you want to stay in Spain afterwards, you'll have a lot of job opportunities because there is a lot of job potential and the salaries are also quite high as well. Now, getting into another country that's quite popular among students or students want to learn about is Germany. Germany has been very popular because of the fact that they don't have any sort of tuition fees, even for international students, and a majority of their public universities. They have 380 bachelor degrees that are now offered in English across 400 universities, and the average program for a bachelor's degree in Germany is about 3 years long. Now, what is complicated about Germany is how do you apply? What high school diplomas do they accept? There's 2 things that make Germany a difficult place to apply to. One is the fact that public universities do not accept predicted grades. So you will have to wait till you get your final A-level results to be able to apply. And that means you will most likely have to take a gap semester or a gap year. Now, another reason that Germany is difficult is because they can have very specific subject requirements. So if you're coming for A-levels, they have specific subjects that they accept, specific ones that they don't. If you're applying for a STEM program, they usually want you to have at least 2 sciences or a math. So you have to do your research very early on for Germany. If you're applying for IB, they also have very specific subject requirements. And the main way that they kind of check your qualifications is through a platform called UniAssist. So what universities will generally ask you to do is use this platform called UniAssist, where you have to submit your educational qualifications. And what UniAssist will do in result is give you a piece of paper that says, hey, this is what your German qualification is. So the German grading scale is from a 1 to a 4. 1 is the highest mark, 4 is the lowest mark. So let's say you have a 43 on IB. They'll tell you that in German grading scales, you have a 1, and you'll have to use that document that UniAssist provides you to then go on to the university's portals and apply directly to the university. And this is what that paper looks like. It's called a VPD. I can't pronounce the whole thing, but just in short form, it's a VPD. And this is the document that you must have. So here you can see that this student had a 2.0 in the German scale, and he was applying for science programs, and he had taken, I think, 2 sciences and a math, and his A-level grades were ABB, I believe. So an ABB translates to a 2.0. And if you have a 2.0, generally most universities will accept you, as what they generally ask for is a 2.5 or lower. So a 2 is a very good score. Now, some universities have something called an NC admissions, and an NC admissions basically means that there's a number of seats that are available. So they'll say we have 50 spots available. So they'll take all their applicants, and the top 50 applicants are accepted. Whereas some universities have something called an NC Fry. So an NC Fry is essentially as long as you meet the minimum criteria, which is going to be that you have a high school qualification, you'll be accepted. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're applying to universities. Usually I recommend students to have a combination of NC Fry and NC, just so they can be sure that they'll at least get accepted into one or two universities as they go through. There are a couple of universities that don't require uni assist evaluation. So these are ones that you can apply to with predicted grades. And for if you're applying for bachelor's, Deggendorf is kind of the only one that would be suitable. They have about 10 courses in English, from I think electrical engineering, artificial intelligence, international management, nursing, bioinformatics. So it's a good option for students that don't want to take a gap semester, don't want to take a gap year, and want to go right into it. If you're applying to private universities, by the way, no, none of the universities will require any sort of uni assist evaluation, but they will have tuition fees that you have to kind of keep in mind, which can range from about 10,000 euros a year to all the way to about 20,000 euros a year. And these are some other popular universities. Carlsbenz School of Engineering, they have a mechanical engineering program in English. This is a private university, so it's about 16,000 euros a year. There's also a university called Technical University of Munich. This is kind of seen as, Germany's top university. They have two programs in English, data science and also aerospace engineering. So another suitable option. Now in the province of Munich, they have said that international students do have to pay tuition fees. So Technical University of Munich is now about 4,000 euros a semester, so about 8,000 euros a year. Again, a great price for one of the best universities in the world. And then you have Technical Hochschule of Ingolstadt, which has a civil engineering program in English. Another thing that you might notice when applying to German universities is the name. So some will say Technical University, some will say Technical Hochschule. So Technical University is just one that is going to be having a lot of STEM courses, as compared to a research university, which might just have University of Freiburg or University of Leipzig. So these are some of the key differences. And then one more thing to keep in mind is you'll see the name Hochschule pop up quite often. What Hochschules are they're kind of universities of applied sciences. So these are universities that are going to have fewer courses, but they're going to be very hands-on, and kind of their main job is to get you ready for the job market. They're not going to do a lot of research. It's going to be more hands-on, more working with companies, working in group projects, assignments, practical work, rather than research work. So that's just something perhaps also to consider as you look and see what would be a suitable place for me to learn. Yeah, so looking at timeline now of applying. So generally the applications for Germany open on April the 15th if you want to start studying in September or October, and they close on July the 15th. So this is before IB results are released or A-level results are released. So it can be quite difficult. It's almost impossible to apply as an international student. So that's why you have to wait either a semester and apply for the January intake, or you have to wait a year to apply for the next fall intake. IB results can be released before, but it was just not enough time to get your uni assist evaluation to be able to apply to the public universities. So yeah, one thing I will say is sometimes students are really against taking a gap year or a gap semester. So what you can do is you can go to a private university for a year, and then afterwards you can transfer to a public university. And what you can do is apply to the public university for a higher semester, so you won't lose time, and you'll go into the public university and start off as a second-year student. Now, another popular destination for a long time has been the Netherlands. Recently, it has become a bit less popular because they don't really want as many international students anymore. And the other reason is because housing is very hard to get by in Netherlands in some of the main cities. So if you're looking at cities like Amsterdam, Rotterdam, it's very tough to get housing. And the new government kind of has told universities, let's not recruit too much internationally because our housing market can't really take it. Nevertheless, there's thousands and thousands of students that apply each year, even this year, that are going to be going. So it's still a good option to look into. The main thing is just know what is it going to be your strategy to get housing before you actually apply and before you make the decision of going there. So the Netherlands has very, very good universities that teach in English. So you have universities that are technical, such as Technical University of Eindhoven, Technical University of Enschede. And then you have universities that are more research-based. So this would be the University of Amsterdam, University of Leiden, where you have a lot of social sciences, economics, business courses that are taught in English. Erasmus is another popular one of them. So again, it's kind of like Germany, where you would have research universities and technical universities. So if you're looking for STEM courses, you're looking at the technical universities. If you're looking for more social science, business, you're looking at the research universities. Types of programs, as I mentioned before, it's kind of like Germany again. You have some programs that are numerous fixes, and you have some that are non-numerous fixes. Numerous fixes, once again, just means that there's a limited number of seats, and the top-ranked students will get accepted. So for these sort of programs, they have an earlier deadline. So the deadline will generally be January the 15th if you're looking to study in September, and you'll get results by April the 15th or earlier. So yeah, and the non-numerous fixes, there's generally no requirement. As long as you meet the minimum requirements, you can be accepted. And the deadline is also a lot more relaxed, with April or end of March being the deadline for non-European students.
And do you need your final results before you apply, or can you apply with predicted grades?
So for Netherlands, you can apply for it with predicted grades.
Okay, and are again A levels and IB quite well received and understood in these systems?
Yes. IB, A levels, no issue at all. Again, if you have a national system, sometimes they'll ask you to do some additional things. So, for example, if you're coming from the CBSE system in India, you have to do a math test. Similarly, if you're coming from the Pakistani system, so national systems are just tricky in that sense. One thing that I recommend if you're going to apply to Europe with any sort of national system is take the SAT, take some sort of standardized test. You know, there are some national systems that are a lot easier than what the Dutch high school system is like. You know, I've been to the Philippines and I went to some high schools, and everyone had a high school average of about 96%. And I'm not saying that, you know, they weren't very talented students, but when everyone in your class has a 96%, it's sometimes universities look at that with a bit of suspicion. So having some sort of SAT score, which, you know, on a general scale is more widely accepted, can give universities more confidence in accepting you. So if you're doing a national system, again, it also works against sometimes. For example, the French system is notoriously very, very difficult. But so take the SAT, it'll work in your favor if you get a high score.
Amazing. And one last thing, there was nothing around a specific like test or admissions test requirement in the Netherlands. Is that also correct?
Yes, if you're doing A levels, if you're doing IB, generally there's not going to be any sort of admissions test required. Some cases, for example, let's say your A level predicted grade for math isn't great, or your A level predicted for your IB math predicted grade isn't great. They might ask you to do an additional test called the OMTA for math, just so they can evaluate your application better. But in general, there's no entrance exam required if you're doing the IB or A levels.
Got it. Super helpful. Okay. Thanks so much.
If you're coming from the American system, there are additional requirements, and that is you must have done 3 AP exams, and you must have a score. Sometimes the universities will say a 3 and above or 4 and above, so that will be more university independent. But in general, you will need APs to be able to study in the Netherlands if you're coming from the American system.
And one other kind of like a side factor, but their English is really well spoken in the Netherlands as compared to, let's say, Spain and France or Italy, where more people would be speaking Spanish, Italian. Or,
100%. So yeah, one thing I would say is, you know, if you're going to Spain or Italy, yes, maybe you can get by with just English, but you really need Spanish or Italian, at least at some basic level, to go to the police station, to get your paperwork done. Netherlands is that one place where with just English, you're going to be just fine. They speak English at a very high level, so you don't need to know the local language. Again, I recommend to learn it. Just it's good to have, but it's not a requirement to live, or you won't face any issues just because you don't speak Dutch.
Got it. Super helpful. Thanks so much.
Yeah. And yeah, as I mentioned about the application procedure before, January 15th is going to be your deadline if you're applying to programs that have a fixed number of seats. If you're applying to a program that doesn't have a fixed number of seats, you can usually apply till the end of March, April. And then around April, May is when you get your results from universities, and September is when classes will start, and August, last week of August, is when they have their orientation. Another great thing about the Netherlands is their visa process. So what I didn't mention about Italy and Spain is that their visa process can be quite tedious. But the Netherlands, for example, the visa process is so simple, where the university does everything for you, and they basically just tell you, hey, go to the embassy, your visa is ready for collection. You go to the embassy and you collect your visa. Whereas for the Netherlands, whereas for Spain, Italy, there's a lot of paperwork that you have to do, get your criminal background check, get a medical test done, show a lot of financial proof. So that's another advantage of going to the Netherlands, and one reason why it's been such a popular destination as well. And also, again, it's not as affordable as Spain or Italy, perhaps, but you're still looking at tuition fees around 13,000, 14,000 euros per academic year. So for a 3-year program, you're looking at about 42,000 euros in total.
In total. Amazing. And are most courses 3 years long in Netherlands?
Yeah, 3 years long. One thing I
Absolutely.
will say though, if you're going to the Netherlands, even if the course is 3 years long, just have that in the back of your mind that you might have to spend another semester or another year, just because it is very academically rigorous. And I think about 60 to 70% of international students don't finish on time, just because it's a different educational system and it
Hmm.
takes some getting used to, and the exams are no easy feat to pass.
Absolutely.
Now, getting into Central Europe, a lot of students ask us about countries like Czech Republic, Hungary, Poland. So the main thing that I always say is I think Central Europe is a good option if you're looking into medicine programs. Otherwise, I would look elsewhere because nowadays you can find other programs in countries like Spain, Italy, the Netherlands, and Scandinavia. But for medicine, Central Europe is quite popular because there's a lot of countries that offer medicine in English. So, for example, University of Debrecen, University of Pécs, Semmelweis in Hungary offer medicine in English. They also have other programs in English, but medicine is what they're primarily known for. These qualifications allow you to practice everywhere in Europe. They allow you to practice in the UK. These universities also have a very high USMLE pass rate. I think all three universities have above a 95% USMLE pass rate. So it's a great option. In terms of tuition fees, you're looking at about 16,000 euros per year. So good option for medicine. Everything else, I would rather go somewhere else just because I think there's better economies out there to go and study in. Czech Republic, same as what I've said before for Hungary. Great offerings for medicine. Charles University is one of the best universities for medicine in the world. I think they had a USMLE pass rate of about 99.5% or something like that.
Yeah.
So they have a very low acceptance rate as well. You're looking at about an acceptance rate of 10% for medicine programs. And the primary requirement, if you're looking to study medicine anywhere in Central Europe, so Czech Republic, Hungary, Bulgaria, is going to be that you pass your entrance exams. Now, the entrance exams can be quite tricky because, let's say, unfortunately, you're in a country where there's not a big population. Most likely, your country is not going to have any sort of testing centers. So what you'll have to do is, if you want to study in Czech Republic, you'll have to fly to Czech Republic and take the entrance exam there. Or you can look for kind of a hub near you. So, for example, the UAE has a lot of testing centers and a place where Charles University does administer their test. So you
Hmm.
could come to the UAE and take your entrance exam there. Hungary has done a good thing where now they've made it online, so no matter where you are, you can take the test. But if you're looking into Czech Republic specifically, you will have to find a place to do the entrance exam in person. Now, going into the other side of the world or other side of Europe, looking at Scandinavia, these are going to be your countries where you've got very strong economies. You've got a very high kind of GDP per capita. You have very strong economies and places where you can think, okay, I can go here, I can do my degree, and I can also stay here after I graduate
Really
and
high quality of life as well.
live a very high quality of life. One of the things
Yes.
that Scandinavia is very popular for are STEM programs, especially focusing on sustainability, renewable energy, engineering, and technology. It's one of the regions of the world that is very kind of pushing forward when it comes to sustainability. It's one of the
Absolutely.
leaders in renewable energy and technology. So this is a great place if you want to look for degrees that are not only going to be relevant for now, but for the future, you're going to be getting a good base for yourself. If you're looking at studying, maybe living in the Middle East later, the Middle East has this new push of trying to be more renewable and sustainable. So these degrees can really carry you well, not only in Scandinavia, but in the rest of the world as well.
Hmm.
Looking at Sweden, you have four main universities. You've got Uppsala, you've got Lund, you've got Stockholm University, and then you've got KTH, or Institute of Technology. Uppsala University is great if you're looking for those sustainable courses. They've got a course in energy transition, sustainability, and leadership. One thing that you'll notice also about some of the programs in Scandinavia are they're very specific. So they're not going to be very vague, but they're going to be, so it's not a bachelor's in sustainability. It's a bachelor's in energy transition with a focus on sustainability and leadership. It's a bachelor's in sustainable development and industrial engineering. And I think as we go on now, and getting a bachelor's becomes kind of a prerequisite for any job, I think having a very niche degree can be very useful because not only can go for broad job offerings, but you can stand out with a very niche offering, something that
Absolutely.
a lot of other students may not have. Everyone's going to have a bachelor's 5 years from now, so these things can help you stand out slightly. Lund University is very famous for biomedicine programs in mathematics, physics, and maths. You've got KTH that only has one program in English, unfortunately, which is in information and communication technology, but a great university to look at nonetheless. And then you also have Stockholm School of Economics. I think the one thing I like about Stockholm School of Economics, it kind of goes away from a very basic BBA to a BBA with a concentration of international trade and shipment to a focus on retail management. and also it is one of the best schools in the world for economics as well. I would say
Absolutely.
if you're looking at studying, these five universities have a good range of programs in English, and these are the only five universities that really have English taught programs. So these could be good universities to look into. From an admissions process, they're also a lot more relaxed. They accept pretty much every national high school diploma, A
Mhm.
levels, IB, so you don't have to worry too much. The main thing that I always say with the British system and the IB is the IB diploma program and A levels you're safe with. If you're doing B Tech, if you're doing IBCP, that's where things can get very complicated, and most likely it won't be feasible to get accepted. So go for the IBDP or go for the A levels rather than B Tech or IBCP.
More acceptable.
Yeah. Some of them will have subject requirements. And again, this is going to be mostly for students coming from the high school, US high school diploma. So if you are going for a STEM program, they might need physics 2, which is a physics 1 or physics 2 in AP terms, a chemistry 2, which is AP chemistry, a biology 2, which is AP biology. So if you're coming from the US system, just make sure you have at least some APs under your belt. And now looking into Denmark, another very popular destination and one that is, again, safe, great economy, and a place where you can really build a future for yourself. The downsides are always going to be that it's the weather isn't going to be as great as what you'd get in Spain and Italy, and that people might not be as friendly, but the countries are going to be fantastic as a long-term perspective option. So they've got programs in chemical engineering and biotechnology in English. They've got a lot of programs in IT. I would say in Scandinavia, Denmark would be the country that is fast forward or leading in the IT department. So you have
Okay.
a lot of universities offering a lot of good technical courses in English. Again, Copenhagen Business School, popular for business programs. Again, the aspect I like about them is their kind of niche programs on international shipping and trade. And I think those are programs that are worth looking into. A lot of students sometimes, when you look at business, you think of investment banking, you think of finance, but they're very small programs such as the one Copenhagen Business School offers, where they focus on how do you sell sugar to the rest of the world? How do you become an importer and an exporter? And
Mm.
this is what runs the economy, and these could be small things that can give you a boost or a leg up when you look for a job after you graduate. Now, looking into both Denmark and Sweden, the good thing is that they both do have some sort of centralized portal where you can apply for them. So for Sweden, this is going to be universityadmissions.se, and their first round of admission closes on January the 15th. So by then you have to apply, and by June 19th, you have to apply for any supporting documentation for the second round of admissions. And the second round of admission usually starts in April, and the 3rd June is when the applications open for the spring semester. One thing to keep in mind about Sweden is some universities will accept predicted grades, some won't. So this is something to look into early on before you start applying, and make sure that you have a good list of at least 4 to 5 universities that can accept you with predicted grades. Okay. And yeah, so that was kind of an overview of studying in different parts of Europe,
Super
Scandinavia,
insightful.
Europe, Central Europe. I know there's a lot that we went over. There's a lot of information, but I hope it allowed you to get an idea of what the general requirements are like. We didn't get too
Yeah.
deep into specific universities because then I think it would be a very, very long webinar. But I hope this can somehow give you more insights. And again, if you would like to learn more, please feel free to reach out to us, and we can help you figure out, okay, what are going to be some prospective universities that you can look into? What are some prospective programs that you can look into? We have a great network of mentors that are studying around different universities in Europe. So we have students that are in Southern Europe, in France, in Germany, in Italy, in Norway, in Sweden, and they can give you a more realistic perspective of what their experience has been like. And most of them are international students themselves, so you get their firsthand experiences. And then, of course, we can help you with things like getting your application submitted, making sure that you have the documentations done properly and they're using the application portals correctly. We can then also help with the visa process. And then also, once you get to your country or your destination, we always have a mentor there that can help you settle in, get your Metro card, get your SIM card, small little things that you might not think about before, but can be a big hassle once you land. And yeah, thank you once again, and thank you, Zubair, for giving us the time.
Amazing. No, thanks so much, Austin. It's been super insightful. I have to say that I think the UK still counts as part of Europe. So I've been living in Europe for the last almost a decade and still have not had the deep insights on different programs, the different strengths of these programs as well. And I'm sure that you and your team have a lot of value and support to offer to our community as well. So we've come to the end of the session. I know that one of our questions was from Yara asking if she could find an email to contact us in. And so on the screen right now, you can see a link to the intellete.com as well as their email address. So please do keep a note of that and reach out to them if you want any extra support. We'll also be listing Intellete on our Uni Guide page on the website. So hopefully we can facilitate some introductions to the team that Austin is leading. One question that's come up, and maybe Luke's question could be summarized first, was around STEM programs. So you said the technical universities, and are there in particularly destinations that you would say are stronger in terms of technical versus, let's say, social sciences?
Yeah, I would say Germany would be the strongest for STEM programs. If you're looking into engineering, you've got pretty much every sort of engineering covered in Germany. You have aerospace, you have universities offering mechanical, civil. So I would say Germany would be a great destination. Denmark as well would be a good destination. They have a lot of different technology programs. So I would say if you're looking for STEM programs, you should be looking at Germany and then Scandinavia. Southern Europe would be better for humanities, social sciences.
Amazing. For those joining in, please feel free to send in your questions in the chat, and we'll try to get your questions answered by Austin as well. The other question that came from Yara was around what's better, to take a foundation year or to take A levels?
Take A levels. Do not take a foundation year. A lot of European universities do not accept foundation years. So we've had this issue before where some students have taken a foundation year and then they've said, okay, where can I go in Europe? And the option is pretty much nowhere. So do not take a foundation year, take 3 levels.
Okay, that's a very clear answer there. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think because a lot of European universities are expecting a high school diploma, and
exactly.
The full A levels is the only qualification of that, or the IBTP completed as well.
Exactly. So some universities, for example, the one that I attended in Spain called UC3M, they have a foundation year. But even to be eligible for their foundation year, you still need a high school qualification equivalent to the Spanish high school diploma. And a foundation year is not equivalent to that. You need 3 A levels. But let's say your 3 A level scores weren't great, then they would say, hey, take our foundation year, and then we'll accept you.
Amazing. We have another question which may be linked to a bit of ZNotes, but we can bring this in. If I got full marks in some of my GCSE subjects, how do I apply for scholarships from ZNotes program? So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about scholarship programs in Europe. How applicable are they? How easy are they to get for international students? The fees are obviously much better than most universities, but yeah.
Yeah, so it's a bit tricky. Generally, if you're looking at public universities in Europe, they're not going to have any sort of scholarships just because they're quite affordable to begin with. If you're looking at private universities, for example, IE, they have a good range of scholarships, but again, IE is quite expensive to begin with. So even if you get a good number of scholarship, it would still be quite hefty. So I would say public universities, generally not a lot of scholarships. Private universities can have some scholarships. And then you can have government scholarships. So for example, Hungary has something called the Hungarian Stipendium, which is kind of Hungary's government scholarship, and they have different dealings with every single country out there. So for example, let's say you're from Pakistan and you want to apply for this scholarship. There's a specific set of requirements, which is you must have a certain number of points in the FSC and you have to take a separate entrance exam. But let's say now you're in India. So now Hungary has a different dealing with the Indian government. So you have to look into specific requirements. But for example, Hungarian Stipendium is a scholarship that I highly recommend students to look into. It's a scholarship that covers your tuition, it covers your housing, it covers your flights. So that's a scholarship that I can really recommend looking into. Other countries have something similar. Italy has a government scholarship where they kind of give you your tuition fees depending on how much your family earns. So that can be one way to bring down that initial tuition fee of 4,000 to 2,000 or maybe 1,000. We've had a student that last year got accepted to Politecnico de Milano, but he was from Jordan and it was still a bit expensive for him. So his tuition, which was initially 4,000, went down to I think about 1,500. So that's something that you can look into as well. And then they also have another scholarship where if you really need help, they can also give you a stipend of about 700 euros a month. So I would say government scholarships versus university scholarships are different, and something that you have to look into. The main requirement sometimes for a government scholarship will just be that you have a letter of acceptance from a university and then that you're able to show that you need financial help.
Okay, Very
Yeah,
interesting. So looking at the central scholarship opportunities that are out there,
yeah,
and of course, you already mentioned that many German programs are actually full scholarship, fully free in the first place. Living expenses,
exactly.
of course, will not be covered, but
Yeah,
that could also be a destination of choice as well.
100%. Yeah.
We have another question coming from Cops540. He's asking if you change to a private examination center to sit for the A2s while you sat for AS in the school, will it affect your application?
No, as long as you've done A levels, you're good. Doesn't matter if you if you take them privately or if you take them with the school.
Okay, that's good to hear. I think that's been the real reaction in globally as well. As
Yeah.
long as your results are at the level that are expected by the university, they do not matter. Um, are there? Maybe this is a slightly tangential question that I've just thought about. But how important are letters of recommendations in European universities? Because I didn't see many in the requirements.
Yeah. If you look at public universities, they don't care. They're not even going to ask for them. If you look at private universities, they're going to ask for them. Public universities don't care. They
Okay,
don't ask for personal statements, extracurriculars, MUNs don't really play an impact for public universities. For
okay.
private universities, they can make a difference in primarily if you can get a scholarship or not, not really for admission.
Okay, interesting. I also thought that this would be an important point for someone who's left school, that to maintain a relationship, to at least
Yeah, fair.
get the letter of recommendation from teachers that they trust and they maintain a contact with as well.
Yeah,
Maybe a question I can answer: the difference between AS or A2. When we're talking about the British examination system, which is the A levels, that is broken down into 2 years. The AS is done in year 12, and A2 is done in the final year in year 13. So full A level is when you have done the AS exams in year 12 and the A2 exams in year 13. There are some A levels which do the full A level in a single year, so they'll do it at the end of year 13. But many of us who did the Cambridge curriculum will be doing it across 2 years, so that they have year one and year two, which adds up to produce your final A level grade.
yeah. One thing I want to touch on there, just as a side note, is when applying to private universities in Europe, um, of course, your predicted grades matter, but a lot of the times your AS grades matter more just because they
Okay.
give a better indication of what you're going to do. What some universities have noticed is students having very high predicted grades, but at the end of the year, not reaching anywhere near that. So they've started to take into account more your GCSEs, your AS levels, and your internal academic record to decide whether to admit you or not. Especially, I've seen this in private business schools across Spain and France. So, if you are in your kind of AS years or GCSE years, make sure that you do your best for those exams.
Absolutely, that's a good pointer. We still have Austin for a couple more minutes. If any other questions come to mind, please continue to send through the chat.
Yeah.
You talked a lot about timelines, and you said that there are some countries and destinations that you'll have to skip out a semester or a term to be able to achieve. Um, how has your experience been with students who've had to kind of take 6 months off or a year off before they go to university? Has that affected their experience, or are you still have you seen them thrive in their
No,
destination?
I still think I've seen them thrive at the destination. I think sometimes students have this kind of fear of falling behind, or you see your peers in university, and it kind of makes you think, okay, maybe I'm wasting a year. I think there's a lot of valuable things that you can do in that year. For example, if you're looking into a place like Germany, you can take that year to get your German to a high level. Just so
Mhm.
once you get there, I mean, there's two advantages of that. One is that you can then apply to German and English taught programs,
Yeah.
which gives you a lot more opportunity. Second is once you get there, you'll have a lot easier time getting internships and also just kind of building yourself up for assimilating in the country better. And that's one thing
Yeah.
that I always recommend is, a lot of the times students can get a bit shy or a bit intimidated once they get to Europe. That was certainly the
Yeah.
case for me. I got to my university in Spain, 120 of us in class, 119 Spanish. I was the one foreign student. But I had learned Spanish for 2 years, so that made the process much easier to kind of integrate and make friends. So you can take that year to do that, and you can do other things as well. And the one thing to keep in mind is a lot of European programs are only 3 years. So even if you take a gap year or a gap semester, you're still looking at about 4 years total, which is what the case is in places like Canada or the US.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and then another thing is, it's just, I don't think, 1 year is going to make that much of a difference. And there's a lot of skills that you can pick up during that time.
Yeah. It doesn't. It's a
Yeah. Yeah.
difficult to see the impact of it in the long term.
Yeah.
Maybe this is a good summary question for you. What are the benefits to go to Europe? Let's say, and we're talking about Central Europe or continental Europe, let's say,
Yeah.
versus
Yeah.
the UK. What would you be the top? advantages to be
Yeah,
valid.
yeah. I think some of the advantages, that are quite obvious are the low tuition fees, but some of the advantages that I think about when I look back at my time in Europe is I felt like it really made me grow as a person. I felt like being in an environment where it was a bit unfamiliar and I kind of it's a bit of a stretch probably, but I used to think back, at my dad when he moved to Saudi Arabia in 2006 and what that was like being in such an unfamiliar environment and having to learn so much of your own. I felt like
Mhm.
Spain was like that for me, having to learn so much of my own. I think if I went to a place like the UK where, everyone speaks English, there's a good community of Pakistanis, I felt like I might have gotten a bit too comfortable early on. Of course, that's not the case for everyone, but I just felt like that might have been me. So I think going to a place like Spain or just Europe in general allows you to grow up a lot more than you might do if you go to the US or Canada. You're around just a few people that are from your country, so you have to push yourself out. You have to get out of your comfort zone. You're learning a new language. You're dealing with government paperwork, and I think it just kind of accelerates your growth. And that's something that I really felt like I was able to do in Europe. Another thing that I loved was just the aspect of traveling. It was always a big thing that I wanted to do, but having a Pakistani passport, one visa to another, and it used to drive me nuts. Now being in Europe, having that one European residence card that allows you to travel all of Europe, so you would Friday afternoon after class, you would fly to Portugal, and then Monday morning you'd be back in time for your morning class. I think that was something very special, and that was something that's very hard to replicate, I would say. Um, that aspect I just loved. Weekends in France, weekends in Italy, weekends in Czech Republic, taking the Euro train everywhere. I think that was something that I really, really enjoyed. That I just can't recommend enough. I think that travel experiences were very valuable for me.
Yeah, I can attest to that as someone who has to go through multiple visa processes just to get to a destination. And so as a UK student, you don't get access to Europe. You still need to
Yeah,
continuously apply for Schengen visas.
yeah,
But I do know that many students who end up studying in Europe end up using that advantage to travel
yeah,
much of the European countries. So your ID card becomes your pass to any European country.
yeah.
There's a very kind of soft borders across the EU. Um, Lots of similarities and lots of experiences you can have as well. I would also just highlight the Erasmus program because I know it's become less in the UK, of course, but it's still a big part of the European university experience, which is about getting experiences in different institutions.
Yeah.
So you may be, studying in Spain, but you can then spend a semester or a year in another institution that may help you develop and experience a different teaching style, course materials, even researchers, to kind of get that kind of wider experience. Would I be right in saying that?
100%, 100%. And I think it's also, let's say the UK is your dream, but it might be financially out of reach. It's one way of, going into. I mean, I know the Erasmus program is for Europe, but every European university also has something called non-European mobility programs, and this is when you can go to places like the UK, US, Canada, Australia, but still be
Mhm.
paying the fees that you're paying at your home university. So it's one way of maybe getting to experience the UK or the US, which was perhaps financially out of reach initially, but now you can do so for 6 months or a year. And then again, even if you're staying within Europe, it's a great chance to experience another culture, experience another university, a different type of learning. And I think every Erasmus student that you talk to will look back at their 6 months or a year as kind of one of their best or their highlights of university life or life in general.
Absolutely. Um, Final question from GCSE Archimedes. This is the same for UK universities. So I think he might be asking about what was the question we were on in the beginning? Okay.
Beginning, we
Um,
were on. Was it about the is the foundation year better or a
Maybe it
twos?
could have been that, or it could be related to the difference between private and exams, or doing it in the school. So if it's related to the AS and A2 question that was asked a few minutes ago, then it's the same. I think UK universities are uh, care most highly about the final exam results versus where you actually did those exams. And oftentimes there are clear circumstances why you had to leave school for various reasons. So if as long as you're clear about it. However, it is important to note that for UCAS, where you will be applying to any UK university, you will need reference letters. So, having someone who's like a trusted mentor or teacher, even from your old school, to help you through that process is quite important. If you apply through UCAS as an individual, you will need to go through a few more steps versus if you're going were at a school and your school would have its own license and its own kind of special code which will allow you to sign up. So just noting that as a private candidate, you will not get that privilege, but it's still manageable and achievable for sure. I think that was the last one, and I think we're also at time. It's been amazing to have you, Austin, on our call today. Um, I will definitely send in a quick note to all those who listened with us today about checking out the platform and the support that you offer. And hopefully we can find ways to work with you more closely to get more visibility about studying in destinations which may not be, typical for students or are not as well aware of in our community. So I've just sent the link to the website in the chat for those of you listening in live. But again, thanks so much, Austin, for a very, very insightful conversation.
Of course. Thank you so much, Zubair, and thank you for your whole team for setting this up on such a short notice as well. Thank you.
Have a good rest of the day, everyone. We'll
Thank you.
have a quick survey at the end of the session as well, so we'd love for you to share your feedback as well. So I'll put that up in the meantime, and thank you so much for joining in. Take care, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye bye.